Okay.
I just got to press OK up here.
Greetings. How is everyone doing? I'm Ishmael Perez, and I'm here with a longtime truther and huge proponent in the Great Awakening, Simon Parks. What have you been up to, Simon?
Well, first of all, thanks ever so much for inviting me. Just for your audience, you'd had that very nice chat with Kerry Cassidy. My name came up, and Kerry got back to me and said, hey, do you want to do it? And we wrote to you, and you did. So that's why we're here, and very delighted to be part of it. Just so everyone can say, who doesn't know Merlin, this is Merlin. He'll be jumping down in a minute. There he goes. So, yeah, what am I doing at the moment? Eh, Before we went live, as it were, you were saying a number of people had asked you, where's Simon? Has he gone quiet? Has he left the scene? No, I've got NDAs with the White Hats, particularly in the RV side. I've got 5 NDAs, one overall, and then 4 separate ones to do with historical assets. I can say that.
Mhm.
And so it's making it very difficult um, in terms of what I can and can't say. But I haven't left the scene. And once we get November over with and we get, the inauguration next year over with, I think the interest back in aliens and esoteric stuff will go back as it was, and we'll get a big resurgence in all the topics that have just taken second best at the moment.
Yeah, just so that my audience are aware of what NDA is, it's a non-agreement, or NAD, right? Non-agreement disclosure.
No, it's a non-disclosure agreement, NDA,
Okay,
non-disclosure agreement.
I was
Mine's
right.
a bit different. It's a non-circumventing, non-disclosure agreement, and mine is American and British.
I see. All right. So that is very interesting. And these agreements are about not really disclosing anything regarding the RVs and the new financial system, right? Is that what they're about?
They're about, in essence, yes, but
Okay.
also there are some things which we would call world politics,
Mhm.
which would implicate or have bearing on it. So I wouldn't be able to go too much down that because although it might not be seen as an RV subject, the actions or happenstance of that would have an impact on the RV. So it's just a case of what I can and what I can't answer.
And it makes a lot of sense because you also don't want to disclose this information to the, people that are on the wrong side, on the opposite side of our of the good movement that is taking place from behind the scenes. I've come to understand that it is a chess game, that it is a chess game that technically has been going on for a long, long time. See, most people are under the impression that the Earth Alliance military slash White Hat movement began in 2016 or 2017 with WikiLeaks, 17th letter of the alphabet coming online anonymous. And technically, that is not true. I've come to understand that the White Hats have been around for a long, long time. And technically, you could actually trace them back to ancient times. This war between good and evil is not just currently taking place now, it's actually been going on for thousands and thousands of years. Would you agree?
Yes, I think we can go back to the creation of the 17th letter to President Lincoln,
Yeah.
um, and then we can develop it on from that. But there has been a brotherhood in terms of a military brotherhood as one brother to another that has existed for thousands of years to try to counteract uh, the equivalent of the deep state right back all those times. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that is something that I actually detailed and describe in my book, The Secret Government,
Okay.
which explains this silent but yet important battle that's been going on from behind the scenes between what I call the two brotherhoods. And it's very interesting that you call it a brotherhood because one of the things that I've come to understand is that they are under an oath as well. See, both sides have an oath. One side answers to Satan. I mean, a lot of this boils down to biblical warfare. One side answers to Satan, and this is what I call in my book the Babylonian Brotherhood. And these have been the oppressive forces that we've seen throughout all of history, the rise of the empires, the Dark Ages, all of that stuff was orchestrated by what I call the Dark Brotherhood. And then, of course, you have the Brotherhood of Light, and the Brotherhood of Light have always been here counteracting and mitigating every attempt at world domination. So this concept of NWO, one world government, that the Dark Brotherhood wants to enact is actually no other than the resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. If you want to go back to to 2,000 years ago, um, it all kind of began there, but technically it all kind of, you could all trace it back to Babylon if you want to be like real technical. Would you agree that Babylon was the origin of the Cabal's family lineages?
No, I would go further back, first of all, to Sumeria, which
Samaria,
is
yeah, okay.
which is about 3000 BC, and then before the final flood, go back
Mhm.
between 10,500, 12,500, when that's the original pyramids, the Sphinx, and then back to Atlantis, Lemuria, the Hollow Earth. And so that battle has been going on ever since this planet has been colonized by other beings.
Absolutely. And it's really a proxy war when it comes to the people on this planet, the brotherhoods, who are actually both in connections and are taking orders from two different types of extraterrestrial groups. Would you agree?
Um, I would say they were taking orders from one physical group
Mhm.
and one made of energy. So I would say one sort of dark demonic energy
Mhm.
force and one more akin to a physical status. So I would call one I want to call them both extra dimensional beings rather than extraterrestrials.
I like it.
However, I would say that the grey group, um, rather than giving orders to the government, I think would be sitting around a table having a discussion. That's the bad side. But remember, you've got the good side, and President Trump has experience of dealing with these good guys as well. So has Putin and a number
Mhm.
of others. So I think
Right.
there's quite a lot of people around the good table and the bad table at the moment. Whereas maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, yeah, there were just a handful. Now I think it's quite a party.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've always described these negative interdimensionals, draconian reptilians and grays. And I've always believed that they were pretty much the interdimensional overlords of the Cabal families. When they infiltrated us during the Atlantean Golden Age, I do believe that ancient civilizations were actually um, infiltrated by these interdimensional, dark entities that usurped control of our planet. And the main character that has been, you could say, the leader of the dark forces, this interdimensional character, is what the Babylonians called Belial, would you say? And then, according to the Sumerian tablets, his real name is Marduk. Belial and Marduk is one and the same. And we do know that he was the son of the Anunnaki earth builder known as Enki, right? You had two sons. You had the Sky Lord, Enlil, who was Lord of the Command. And then you had Enki, his rivaling brother, his half brother, who was considered the earth builder. Now, what is your perspective on Enki?
Mm. Well, somebody had to um, start genetically altering humans. Humans were always humans. They were here before anyone came to alter them. Humanity was here before that. So what the evil gods were doing was basically saying, we are gods, we created you. And that's not the truth. But what actually happened was that they started to genetically alter. And so you had one brother who was an absolute geneticist, an absolute expert. But he wasn't the senior brother, he was the younger one. And then you had the older one, you call him Skylar, um, who basically the empire of Anu fell to him. And that's interesting because that's where the Battle of the Pyramid comes in. where one of them was held up in that pyramid, a bit like some of the Wild West shootouts. The pyramid saw quite a lot of action. So, what I would say to you is that whilst it is a very fascinating and interesting story, the reality is that we can't call any of them good because they were just there to make what they could of the human race. Although we would say that one was more beneficial or more benign than the others.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a huge debate that is happening right now. It seems like a lot of people in this community are actually supporting the Enki faction and saying that he was our benefactor. But I began to deep further and investigate, as you would call this other human race that existed prior to them coming to the earth, that were already full functioning humans, super
Yeah.
psychic, telepathic. And I believe that they were the Atlanteans. I believe that the Atlanteans were the original humans. Well, not technically, no. They were the part of the fourth seeding. I heard that even Lemuria existed prior to that. That could be traceable back 2 million years ago. So apparently, advanced human civilizations have been here for millions of years. And that is a fact now, with all the relics and all the archaeological records that are coming forward. But what I've come to uncover, Simon, is that there was a pre-existing advanced human race that was actually supposed to have 12 strands of DNA. And I think they were only using 6 at that point. And the reason being is because the Cedars, which many believe were the Syrians, the tall whites, what's her name? Not Barbara Handclough. God, I can't even think of her name, but she has evidence. Yeah, she has evidence that the Syrians were the original seeders on this planet, and that there were actually different times that they seeded us. Different experiments, you could say, that took place. But back then, before the Anunnaki came into the picture, I came to understand that there was this advanced human race that had up to 6 strands of DNA and 6 that were inactive. And the only reason they weren't fully 12 strands or tapping into their other 6 strands was because they had to evolve spiritually first. And what I've uncovered is that the Anunnaki kind of seduced them with all this technology, causing them to kind of bypass their spiritual evolution. And they kind of lean towards the technological development side of things. And that's when there was that infiltration that took place. It is believed that Enki, the master geneticist, took DNA from a Homo erectus in order to create a slave race, and also took DNA from the original Atlanteans. And that is very synonymous, if you study Gnosticism, to the character known as Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge. The Demiurge, according to the Gnostics, who I believe were in tune, they're part of the Brotherhood of Light, the Essenes, the community of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They were known as the community of Qumran. They believe that this Demiurge was the one who developed a vehicle in order to trap the consciousness of the already existing Atlanteans who had 12 strands of DNA. And what they did is they disconnected some strands, they added monkey genetics, and that's when we dropped in consciousness, or at least that's when Homo sapiens sapiens came into the picture. That actually goes contrary to what Billy Carson is saying. That goes contrary to what David Wilcock is saying, and all these other people that are in this community.
What are they saying? Because I can't remember what
they're saying that Enlil did not approve of the idea of creating a worker race. I guess Enki violated the Nibirian Council. They were known as the Nibirians. They do have a name. They come from planet Nibiru. And they all say that Enki was the one who created us. But what they failed to say is that there was an already existing race that was advanced. See, the reason they are under that premise, my friend, Billy Carson and all these other people, is because they believe that there was only a Homo erectus specimen on this planet, failing to mention that there was another advanced human race that we would consider the Atlanteans. And that's where they get this premise that the Anunnaki came, there was only Homo erectus, there was nothing else. In other words, they deny the existence of an advanced human race, and that they created us from Homo erectus, and so we are. So in other words, Enki is our father, our genetic father, and I've never really bought into that. I think Enki was the one, kind of like what the Gnostics say, the demiurge who created a vehicle, a three-dimensional two-strand DNA vehicle, causing the six-strand DNA Atlantis with the potential of 12 strands, to fall in consciousness and really just reduced us to savagery at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyways, that's what I've uncovered in my thorough investigation. Another person who backs that up is Ashayana Dean. I don't know if you ever heard of her.
Yes.
Yeah, she gives a thorough history of the planet going back to 560 million years when the first human, I guess, the first humans came to exist on this planet. 560 million years ago. That is a long time. The Anunnaki came 450,000 years ago, half a million years ago. So
Yes.
I tend to believe those records more so than the translated Sumerian tablets. And does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing is that actually there's room for both stories without violating. You are essentially right, in my opinion, but there is room for both stories without violating that. First of all, when those Sumerian tablets were deciphered, they are largely accurate, except for two things. One, the story was put in there that the Anunnaki or the reptilians, whatever you want, they created us. Now, that was a deliberate lie to make humans look on them as a god and as the father figure. So that was placed in there, and Zachariah Sitchin correctly translated that. He correctly translated what was that, but what was translated, I believe, was inaccurate. The second thing that was wrong is when these tablets were found in Sumeria, there were a number of cultures, different layers, and these tablets were artificially back in time placed in deep layers to make the archaeologists think that they were about 4,000 years old, when in effect they'd only been put there about 10 or 11,000 years, something like that. But the rest of it is accurate in the sense that if we look at the history of this planet, to my knowledge, I've never had a satisfactory answer from an academic as to how it was possible that the human brain developed in size so quickly. So you're talking about Neanderthal man. You mentioned Erectus. We would actually now refer to him as Homo ergaster. There was another race called Anteceda, and there was Homo habilis. And then you've got, before that, about 2 million years back, you've got the more primitive group. But if you look at the fossilized remains, the brains are growing at a rate that's just not possible. So I believe that each one of those groups is an artificial creation. Now, you're right about humanity. We talk about what we call the Cambrian period. It's about 540 or so million years ago, when 12th dimensional beings landed here. They had 12 strands. Most of them didn't make that transference because the onboard computer of the craft was damaged and couldn't therefore artificially create, a bit like decompression when a diver goes very deep and comes back. They weren't able to do that. I think they lost 3/4 of their crew. But the reality, I believe, is that the Enlil Enki gang did genetically alter humans. So what they did was they tricked the human race to losing all of the strands of DNA bar 2, which are the physical strands. That is why, generally speaking, telepathy is not available, teleportation is not available. But these strands, the law of the universe, multiverse, they couldn't destroy them. And so in our auric field, these strands in each individual person hang here. And over the thousands of years, they've been trying to get back. And where people are successful, then they become very psychic, et cetera, et cetera. So all that happened was that these real strands of DNA were almost turned into an electromagnetic hologram or a holograph.
Mhm.
So people were intelligent enough to work, but not intelligent enough to see the prison they were living in. And
Mhm.
so what I think all good people are trying to do is to try to bring back those 12 strands so that humans can be what they were always supposed to be, which is, a vastly superior individual than we are now. And you've hit the nail on the head where we are technologically outstripping our spirituality, and that can only lead to disaster. So I think to sum up, there's room for both aspects,
Mhm.
um, because I think both are accurate. But I absolutely am solid that humanity was here long before any genetic alteration, and that was just a trick by the overlords.
Right. And that explains why in throughout history, Enki was always known as the great trickster.
Yeah,
Because he was the one who was actually, he proposed the idea to the Nibirian Council.
yeah.
Um, as a galactic historian, Anu and Enlil and Enki, well, actually, Anu, before he had his two sons, he was actually part of a Council of Nine. He was working with the Alcyone Council of Nine. He was in charge of our system, which consists of 600 and 900 worlds, about 52 star nations. That's our local star cluster. And he had to answer to the galactic councils. And I believe that there was an infiltration that took place that gave us Enki. Enki was actually the firstborn, from what I've come to understand. Andal was the younger brother.
Well, then
But
yeah, well,
everybody.
right, but one, that the rules are the same with the reptilian group. That if a brother and a sister have a child, that is the one that becomes the king. And I think what had happened is one was a brother and sister, one was a nephew, so he was outside of the direct bloodline.
Yeah, and that was okay. So Enki's mother was known as Drami. She was the queen of the Orion Empire, which is Draconian. And so what happened was about 1.5 million years ago, during the second seeding, when Earth was Tiamat, they believe that the Earth used to be a super Earth. There's remnants of that. Just look up the asteroid belt, and it's believed that 4 million years ago, there was all these advanced civilizations. Nibiru was supposed to protect us. This was back then when Anu was working with the Galactic Councils, the Interdimensional Alliance of Free Worlds, and so on and so forth. And the reptilians from the planet An, which is orbiting the Draco star system, managed to infiltrate our solar system. Unbeknownst to the Federation, as it was then known, they infiltrated us through a portal in Mars, and that explains the fall of the Martian colony. So eventually, they built out a military outpost on the planet Maldek, which was another jovial planet. Now it's known as the Kuiper Belt. And there is evidence that we used to be part of the 12 planet solar system, with Nibiru being the 12th, but programmed to come in every 3,600 years as it was intended to, because when it's out of our solar system, it's actually patrolling other systems. So we're part of the 24 system, according to the cosmic organization. There's 100,000 systems that make up a constellation, and there's 100 constellations that make up a local universe, and so on and so forth. Everything's well organized. And
Hmm,
so what
that's
happened
true.
was the Draconians, and yeah, this is history. I had to actually access the Akashic records to access intergalactic history
Oh,
because we
did you say you access the Akashic?
yeah, that's one of
Okay.
my games.
Do you see when you do that, do you see it as still pictures or do you see it as a video playing out?
Video. It's images that come to my head, and
So
I
a
see it
video,
like I
not
watch.
not still not still individual pictures, like a film. You
Oh,
see it.
I like a film, yeah. Like just how I'm describing this
Yeah.
infiltration that took place 2 million years ago when they blew up our planet.
Hmm.
How what happened was the Draconians built out a military outpost on Maldek, unbeknownst to the Guardians, unbeknownst to the Nibirian Council, because they were busy protecting other systems. There's 100,000 systems within the under the Syrian jurisdiction. So apparently they blew up planet Tiamat. They destroyed the Martian and the Venus colony. They destroyed the colonies on the jovial planets, and that explains why there's no life forms on the surface. Many believe that they exist in other dimensions. But the whole point is that at one point there was physical life forms here in our solar system, and all the planets were inhabited. So apparently the Draconians used advanced weaponry to blow up Tiamat, which many believe was the original Earth, 3 times the size. And then what happened was, under the direction of the Syrian High Council, when that happened, Nibiru teleported, right? Nibiru, on their 36 elongated orbit, decided to teleport, but they didn't come in the nick of time, unfortunately. By then, Tiamat was already exploded. And then right when Nibiru teleported back into our solar system, they literally beamed planet Maldic, because that's where the reptilians built their outpost. They destroyed it into oblivion using particle beam technology, very similar to the Death Star of Star Wars. And this is where I believe George Lucas draws his information from. And what happened was 2% of the reptilian population survived that implosion. They were able to, I guess, teleport themselves out right before their planet Maldic was destroyed. And they were eventually captured by Anu and the Nibirians. And among those 2%, so the Draconians, the leader was Dramin. Dramin was the leader of the infiltration that took place. And so what happened was, she pleaded to Anu. She begged him, because they were going to, put them to death for violating galactic laws. And she pleaded to Anu. She told Anu that she was going to give him intel on the Orion Empire, so that the Federation could actually win the war in Orion. And Anu said, all right, I'll spare your life, but you got to give me all this intel, because we do need to we need to end the galactic wars. And so one night she actually gave Anu a drink with some stuff that made him really, I would say, the equivalent of heavy alcohol. He got so drunk to the point where he was seduced by her. She started seducing him, doing this erotic dance like a stripper, and he fell for it, got him drunk, had intercourse with him, and that's how Enki came about. It was all part of the Draconian plan to give us the bastard son. And you're right, he was the bastard son. And then afterwards, when Anu came to his senses, he realized that she was carrying his son. And so later on, of course, we come to understand that he also had intercourse with his half-sister, Antu, and that's what gave us Enlil. So you're right, Enlil is the heir to the throne, not Anu. And then according to the Greek translations, Enlil was Zeus. It's interesting how they, the gods had different names in ancient times. And then Enki was Poseidon. And so, that's just a little history that even Saqqara Sitchin wasn't able to, or technically it wasn't recorded in the Sumerian tablets. And many people wonder why there was a leak in the atmosphere of Nibiru, right? They came for the gold to patch their atmosphere. Remember, there was a leak that was causing the Nibirians' lifespan to decrease. Well, the reason that leak was caused was because planet Maldic was full of radiation and plutonium energy, which is, next level nuclear detonation. So what that energy did, so when they imploded that planet, some of that radiation reached the atmosphere of Nibiru, and that's what caused the hole. So that hole was there for about 250,000 years before the Nibirians realized that, hey, this leak in our atmosphere is causing our lifespan to decrease. We need to patch it. And then that's when they came to our planet approximately 450,000 years ago to patch the gold. And that's when Enki proposed the idea of creating a slave race. All because of one bad night that Anu had with Dramin. And, we're still suffering. Yeah, we're still suffering thousands of years later.
I would just add that that Anu thought that his genetics were going to be used to create this new human race. And of course, it wasn't. It was Enki. And that's what caused a lot of issues. The other one that I would take slight issue with you on is that when it became obvious that the reptilian faction had taken over Mars, and the original pyramids on Mars relate to a human, much, much earlier human culture, nothing to do with the reptilians, the face on Mars and the pyramid structures. It was the Palladians that took out the reptilian force on Mars. Unfortunately, their weapon they used, they had overcalculated, and it was far more destructive than they intended. So it was the Palladian force acting on behalf of the Federation, who the suicide mission. That's why it was a volunteer mission, and went in to get through the defenses and took out. But in every other aspect, I agree with what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people wonder, like, why, how come the asteroid belt exists? You know, what was there before? Well, that's part of the planet, the imploded planet Tiamat, when it exploded, you know, and half of it became us, or the current Earth, and that explains why Earth is much smaller now. And then we also have another bigger belt called the Oort, I think, or the Kuiper, I believe it's called Kuiper belt. Well, that used to be the 11th planet known as Maldek. And then, of course, Nibiru was the 12th planet. And Nibiru just came in every 3,600 years.
And if you look from seismic recordings, which is mainstream, you'll see that the Earth's crust is not equal. It goes right down, very, very thin where the explosion took place. And there's no geographical or geophysical explanation for that. That is literally because it was scalped. Part of the planet was completely scalped. But of course, the history that you've put forward, which, as I said, I'm pretty happy to go along with, it doesn't fit with what's been taught in universities, because, you know, the fact that there's another life form that had interaction with us and that we still today paid slaves doesn't fit the masters of the human race. So knowledge is freedom, and I do really recommend anyone listening to this to get Zachariah Stitchin's book, because although, as you quite rightly say, it doesn't have many elements, at the time there were only 6 people on the earth who could actually decipher Sumerian text. Only 6 people, and I believe that by and large he's actually accurately got it. But remember that what's being translated, some of it's lies, but he is translating it accurately. And so it's as close as we're going to get until, you know, a new force takes over on the planet. It's as close as we're going to get to a half decent story.
Yeah, I agree. And it wasn't his fault. You know, he just translated them as they were.
Yeah.
When those records became tainted, as I call corrupted, it was by
Yes.
the priesthood of Belial Baal. Because when Belial Baal took over the affairs of our world, according to the galactic history, he actually brewed an army of clones on the deserted planet Mars to
Yeah.
literally, physically overtake his grandfather Anu. And that's
Yes.
when Marduk took over the planet
Yes.
Nibiru. And as a result of that, he pretty much tempered all the records. He eliminated the veneration of the sacred divine feminine, because, you know, at one point we did honor the mother goddess through various forms and names: Asherah, Venus, Aphrodite. I mean, these are the different venerations, right? Isis, Mary Magdalene. The whole point is that Marduk kind of rewrote everything, changed the records around to make Enki look like our father, to make him look like he was the good guy, he was the one protecting us. No, Enlil sent the flood, he tried to kill us. And people don't understand that the reason Enlil did send the flood, as recorded by the Critias, Plato's work, was because of the fact that Poseidon Enki was trying to corrupt the bloodline, the bloodline that led to Jesus. And he was creating abomination after abomination. And him and his Igigi followers, which were the 200 fallen angels that are recorded in the book of Genesis, were not supposed to mate and copulate with the daughters of man. And because of that, Enlil needed to send a flood to eliminate all the blasphemous hybrids, same things that, you know, the secret space programs are trying to do in the underground bases, create these monsters, right, that are not human, that are not part of the original divine blueprint, and everything that happened.
When we say the secret space program, we just want to be clear. There's a difference between Space Force. Just for any of your listeners who might be confused, there's a difference between the Space Force, which is the good guys, and the secret space program. But again, with the secret space program, that's compartmentalized. There are good guys in, especially now. But you're right, for maybe 10 years plus ago, it was a pretty evil environment. Now I think it's less so.
Absolutely. Yes, there is a split within the programs. One is working with the Alliance. They call it the Space Program Alliance. All right, Solar Warden and
Yeah.
Radiant Guardians, and also I think there's another one called Glory, Radiant. No, wait,
I'm not sure of
Solar
that one.
Warden, Radiant Guardians, and
Radiant Garden. Yes, 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 yes.
Radiant Guardians. Yeah, those are the two factions that have been actually cleaning house in the multiverse. You know what I mean? When it comes to this war with invasive alien AI, it's been kind of destroying galaxies left and right. But that's another subject. Going back to my original depiction of the flood needed to happen. The flood needed to happen because back then we had all kinds of blasphemous abominations that were made by the master geneticists, and this effort to end the bloodline of the original humans, right? Which I believe came from Noah. Uh, Noah, who was a descendant of Methuselah, who in turn was a descendant of the original Adam, right?
Mm,
Or may we say Cain? Not Cain. Cain was the bad guy. He was the offspring of serpent Enki when he raped Eve, or
mm,
seduced her. Sorry, that was the apple incident. So yeah, I believe that the flood needed to happen in order to preserve the original 12 strand, or the potential 12 strand DNA within the family of Noah, which led
mm.
to most of the human race today, with the
Yes,
exception, of course, of the Cabal families.
I'm happy to go with that. What I would just say is that, unfortunately, and to anyone who's been to education knows that when there's a naughty child in the class, the whole class is made to suffer for the failings of that individual. And unfortunately, that is what happened. So let us not forget that an awful lot of what I would call innocent people also suffered in that. I would have preferred for the good guys to have targeted the bad guys, taken them out, rather than just wipe the slate clean. It's like rebooting a computer. That's exactly what they were aiming for. But as you know, Noah and a sizable portion of people actually were tipped off and saved. Um, but yeah, again, I'll go along with that. I think it matches very much what I believe to be true. But I think maybe in those days, justice was a lot harsher than it is now.
Yeah, it was. I mean, back then it was a straight out war between Enki and his brother Enlil.
Yes.
And all Enlil wanted to do was just to preserve the original Adamic blueprint without all these, other hybrids and Camillas and, monsters that Enki was
Yeah.
creating, that actually violated the galactic protocols.
Yes.
And we also see his intervention during the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel incident was an experiment by the sons of Nabu, who was a son of Belial Marduk. And then, of course, they used Nimrod, who was the progenitor of the Cabal families. That's where all the Cabal families could trace their blood to. And so the whole concept of the Tower of Babel was a metaphor that they were using, which meant to create the secret space program, but under the control of under the control of Nimrod, sorry. That was the whole metaphor of building this tower to reach the heavens. That was a metaphor describing a secret space program, an advanced alien technology that was going to be introduced to the planet 3,200 years ago, which was going to allow Nimrod to take over the planet, And of course, that was counteracted upon and neutralized by Enlil and his forces, When they say that the Lord, right, in the Bible is translated the Lord, who's the Lord? Well, the Hebrews called Enlil Zeus Elkron, Elion, and then later they just called him El Shaddai, the Lord of the mountain, same God. He came
Yeah.
down and struck the tower down, confused the languages in order to, again, not repeat what happened in Atlantis, in order to make sure that the humans didn't become seduced again by Nimrod's technology at the expense of their spirituality. So everything happens for a reason. This the whole Old Testament is really describing the battle of the Anunnakis and how they use humans as pawns.
Mm.
Abraham, for instance. Abraham was a white hat, and he was used to detonate the stargates that Marduk was going to use to bring in more reptilians to our planet. And those stargates were located in Sodom and Gomorrah. So Sodom and Gomorrah was actually a white hat job where they actually used Abraham and his people to detonate those stargates. And of course, the angel that appeared to Lot, Abraham's nephew, was a Pleiadian Anunnaki. So we have two factions. We have the Draconian Anunnaki that come from Marduk, sons of Belial, right? Sons of Enki. And then we have the Pleiadian Syrian Anunnaki, who are the good guys, you could say. But again, like you said, ultimately, but they were all fighting each other. But everything happened for a reason, because if they wouldn't have detonated those stargates during Sodom and Gomorrah times, well, guess what? They would have brought in more reptilians, and they would have wreaked havoc upon the planet. So everything happened for a reason. Everything happened for a reason. So one of the things that I describe in my book, The Secret Government, is that Abraham was a white hat. Abraham was a white hat, as well as King.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, yeah, he was a white hat. He was a white hat. King David was a white hat. We also know that Solomon, I think Solomon was more of a gray. He played both sides. And I think, well, what's your opinion on Solomon?
Why do you ask me that?
Because there's so much confusion regarding Solomon. So many people believe that he was a white hat. Some people believe that he was a gray hat, and that he was playing both sides. But who knows? There was this issue where supposedly he killed Hiram a beef. Who knows? And there were like three kings.
He, in my opinion, he'd been tasked with the very beginnings of the RV. He had been
So
tasked.
he was a white hat then?
No, he had been tasked with collecting together as much treasure and gold as he could, with the ultimate aim of passing that to Jews and non-Jews who were good. That's why today in the RV, those of us in the know, we refer to the RV as Solomon's gold, Solomon's treasure. He played one side off against another because geographically where he was, he had a lot of kingdoms around him that were waiting to topple him, to fight him. And he ultimately was a good in the sense that he threw his lot in with the white hats, but he also was very conscious of the fact that there were very powerful nomadic armies or nations on his border. And so he played a very, if I can use the word, clever balancing act between all of the power forces that were around him. And of course, it took to the Crusades for the Crusaders to go in and steal all the artifacts and the treasure, which then ended up all around the world. So I would say that he was a grey hat, but when push come to shove, he would identify with the white hats. Yes.
I agree with you, Simon. I agree with you. And actually, I talk about that in my book, The Secret Government. Okay. I say how I reveal how Solomon was pretty much the one, and just like the way you said it, who accumulated the wealth. And
yes.
So that later his descendants, the Knights Templars, could uncover it, other than the Vatican, because if it would have gone to the Vatican before the Knights Templars, we wouldn't be here right now. America wouldn't exist. And in those artifacts that the 9 Frenchmen discovered, the original Templars, not only did they discover gold and treasures, they also discovered knowledge, blueprints. So the original blueprint that laid down the foundation of our constitutional republic was written by Solomon, and that is what I wrote about. So, and that also ties in with how the Knights Templars were actually the white hats in medieval times, and this is before their prosecution by the Vatican. And we do know that the Cabal was the Vatican in medieval times, and we also know that the white hats, the Knights Templars later, after their persecution, or right before their persecution, they had to flee and hide themselves, and they became the original Pirates of the Caribbean. As to what X marks the spot, they were, all those golds and treasures, they were actually hiding them in certain islands. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. The skull and crossbones, not to be too confused with George Bush's skull and crossbones, but the skull and crossbones. That is why in the country Scotland, which borders England, a group of them landed, and that's why the Scottish Rite is very strong. However, to this day, I would still call the Knights Templar are the guardians of technology that is not yet ready to fall into the hands of the uninitiated. And so the Templars do play a very important role in guarding what I would call sacred objects.
And would you agree that the oath that they were sworn to is the same oath that members within the Whitehead community are sworn to as the Brotherhood?
Yes, I would. There's been many attempts to infiltrate and to corrupt it, but if we were to accept the pure line, the true line, then if you were to follow that, then you'd say that that was unbroken and that was accurate. There are a number of very interesting artifacts which the Templars and only the Templars know. But there's a very interesting connection between them and the National Security Agency, not between them and the CIA, but the NSA and other more white hat type intel groups, where they agree to disagree in the sense that at the moment the Templars are left to guard the treasure. At some point, I think they're all going to have to sit around a table once the cabal is put into a box and really decide what they're going to do with all this stuff.
You just totally confirmed everything I talked about in the secret government.
I haven't read your book. I really apologize. I haven't read it. I will do now.
I would love to send you a copy. PO
Box.
Send
me a copy, sign it, please. And I will definitely read it. The fact of the matter is that I have some connections with what you've spoken about. In fact, Becky was with me in 2015 when the Knights Templar sent an agent to meet me. 2014, thank you, 2014, and we'd just done a conference. And if you've heard my story, then please bear with it. Maybe your audience haven't, but it's Knights Templars, so it might interest them. The guy said he'd been sent by his employers, and it was heartening because he said, my employers just want you to know that everything you say they believe, which I thought was great because, there's members of my family who don't believe anything I say. So it was nice that these external people believed it. And they offered me, certain gifts and said, if the world goes to BS, then there's an underground bunker for you, which we'll pay for, etc. But the reality was that he was from the Templars and he recognized that there was a connection between me and the time period that you're referring to, at that time. So, and I've done 3-4 talks at Freemason temples where I've been asked to give talks open to the public, so not just to the Freemasons, but to the public. And each time, the only topic they want me to talk on is King Solomon. So I've done 4 separate talks at Masonic lodges, temple lodges, and all the topic they want is Solomon. So it's not surprising then that what I've said matches what you've said, what you've read, and what you've written.
It actually matches it 100%, my friend.
Good.
Yeah. I've always supported and defended Solomon in the midst of confusion, because of the fact that I feel very connected to him. I don't know. I just feel like if it wasn't for Solomon, the White Hats wouldn't be in a key position to eliminate the cabal now, thousands of years later. If it wasn't for what Solomon did thousands of years ago. And that is my perspective. That is my belief. And you just confirmed it.
It's very true. And you needed Donald Trump at this time in our history to be the final part to that, to join the circle up. You needed an individual to be able to maneuver governments of the world to allow Solomon's treasure to actually get out and do what it was always supposed to do. So Solomon will always be held very guarded because of the issues with the Jewish faith, with the issues with the Christians, and God forbid, with the Catholic faith. Elements of what we've discussed will never, ever be discussed in the public domain with them putting their name to it, because it's just too difficult for people to get their head around while we're still, as a world, divided into factions, you know. But what you said is accurate. Solomon was placed on the earth at that time, and Trump has been placed on the earth at this time to join that circle up. I'm not saying Trump is Solomon. What I'm saying is that, you know, you have to have a beginning and you have to have an end, and that's where we are with it.
Yeah, and it's all being orchestrated by interdimensionals, and technically by the big guy who is even above all the interdimensions.
Yeah.
Wow, Simon Parks, this is a very intriguing, fascinating conversation that we just had.
Well, I hope your audience are enjoying it and not falling asleep.
Oh no, my audiences are probably the most awakened people on the planet.
Good.
Yeah, they know the truth. You know, they can't be deceived. Very intuitive, very discernful. And you know, for your audiences, I just want everybody to know that the secret government is actually the suppressed history of this invisible war that's been going on between what I call the two brotherhoods: the Brotherhood of Light, the Melchizedeks, and the Brotherhood of Darkness, the Priesthood of Bel. And you know, the Cosmic Origin book, Our Cosmic Origin, actually takes it to the next level and literally describes in detail all the different phases of the galactic wars and the truth about our galactic and universal origin, which began in Lyra. Our, you know, the original human being in our universe actually originated in the Vega star system on a planet called Avia. And so that's what I talk about in Our Cosmic Origin. You know, we've been migrating, we've been colonizing planets for millions of years. Our kind has been at war with the reptilians, who I consider the fallen angels, right? The Bible calls them demons. I call them draconians, one and the same, different terminologies. The gods of mythology, the angels of the Bible, the interdimensionals of today are all one and the same under different names. You have good ones, you have bad ones. And
I think we've just lost him. He's frozen. Come back. Are you okay? We lost a bit of signal then.
since your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
All right.
As long as we're not unstable, that's fine.
Exactly. Exactly. Have you written any books yourself, Simon?
No, I have one, but I'll wait till I retire to get it published. I've just done one on my life. But as it's still developing, I'm still adding chapters to it. So I think I'll wait until I officially retire.
Understood. Fair enough. For those that really want to trace this war between the Cabal and the White Hats, where at one point it involved many worlds, many galaxies, bear in mind that the Federation of Worlds has been at war with the Draconian Orion Empire for millions of years. Very similar to the war between the White Hats. The Federation of Worlds has always wanted to preserve justice, freedom, and cooperation throughout the interstellar civilizations. The Draconian Galactic Empire, very similar to Star Wars, the Rakata Empire, has been trying to do exactly what the Cabal has been doing, but on a galactic and universal level. There is no difference, guys. So for your audiences, you know, my books are available on Amazon.
Well, what to do? Why don't you send us a link as well, and I'll promote your books, and then you can, sell them. That's great, no problem.
Thank you, Simon, and I believe you are a brother. I appreciate that, brother, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not over yet. Sometimes I wish it was, but no, it ain't over yet. I was saying to the RV people some 2 years ago, tentatively talking about retiring. That didn't go down too well. So we're not retiring yet. The Draconis, you talk about the Draconis, and that's interesting because with the spotlight on the political situation in America, Trump and Biden, and I get that. Those topics are literally off the table. And I have indeed been told by the White Hats, please don't discuss it too much at the moment because we don't want attention taken off the domestic political situation in America. But once that's all cleared and done, 2025, then I really hope that interest turns back to ancient aliens and all the rest of it, because it's a topic that hasn't yet been successfully concluded. And the reptilians, and you mentioned the AI, I'm very happy to hear you say that. That's our greatest enemy. It's the AI is the greatest enemy. But of course, the reptilians is the one that takes all the limelight. I'm very familiar with those creatures, met them many times, and appreciate the difficulty that humans have when faced with such beings. Although I would say that the good guys in the military, the US military, have been engaging on a need to engage basis with these creatures for many years. We know, and I think the audience will know, that the Greys definitely have been in, agreements, written agreements, contracts, but they don't really appreciate that behind them are the reptilians. And that's a fascinating story. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I detail it really good in our Cosmic Origin, the galactic history of our world going back to Lyra. And that war was fought in different phases, my friend. It all began when the Draconians actually tricked the Lyrans and then they obliterated them. That was the first human Holocaust. And then the war reached Orion, and for millions of years the war has been existing and been going on in and around Orion. And many believe that George Lucas was able to tap into the Orion Wars when he wrote Star Wars, because they are exactly the same. There was a human resistance against the reptilians in Orion that wanted to live free, and they developed the Black League of Orion. And the Black League of Orion were the rebel resistance described in the movie Star Wars, but under a different name. There's so much truth to these movies that people only knew, but yeah, it's all in my book.
Well, look at all of the people who've successfully written science fiction books or science fiction films, like Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek. All of them had that knock on the door and were told, if you go with this story, nobody will ever stop you writing a book or doing a film. But if you don't do it, we'll make it very difficult for you to operate in the United States. And that's happened time and time again. Stanley Kubrick, I think, is the biggest proponent of what happens if you go against the system, the military industrial complex. So there's plenty of money for people to be made. And the clever part within that is to try to get the truth out. And, look at the Matrix films, where so much of truth has been brought out. So I don't see it that these people compromise themselves. I see it as they were made an offer they couldn't refuse. But what they did, they worked within it to go as far to the edge as they could to get the truth out. And obviously, in Stanley Kubrick's point, it went too far and they killed him. But with the others, it not only makes entertaining science fiction, but it actually has more than a grain of truth in it.
Mm-hmm. And we also see this in the writings of Marvel Comics. When you look at these Marvel movies, Captain America, Hydra, fighting Hydra, right? Developing super soldiers to fight Hydra. Well, who's Hydra? They're the Nazis that took over our country, right? In the 1950s, when they infiltrated us and created all the three-letter agencies and literally became the cabal. There's so much truth to even a lot of these Marvel movies that is pretty much revealing the truth in plain sight. For those that have seen Captain America, Iron Man, all that stuff is, it's all disclosure.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm a little bit more forgiving, not of the CIA really, but I'm a bit more forgiving because I think that people like President Truman and other presidents were put in an impossible position. If you imagine that you wake up one morning and you find there really are beings from another planet, and their technology is so far advanced that all you can do is literally buy time and hope over the decades that you will develop weapons that will allow you to at least hold your own. And so I think a lot of these agencies that were formed originally with good intentions to defend the human race. But became taken over over a period of time. So I'm more forgiving for a lot of these people in the 50s and 60s because I understand that what they were faced with was just it just bends the mind for most people.
Mhm.
And I think they actually did remarkably well. But of course, the problem we've got is all the secrecy, all the cover-ups, which
Right.
still they go on. And I have trouble with that because I'm sure one day we do need to be more open with the populations of the earth.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that the Nazis did to let us know that they had this advanced alien technology was fly their saucers over the White House in 1955, I believe, 1954, letting us know. Was it, the big flyover? That was letting them know. And then what happened with Admiral Byrd? I'm sorry, Admiral Byrd, when he went to Antarctica, he couldn't do anything against these advanced technologies, and that's when they realized, hey, the Nazis they really won the war covertly, and that's when they brought in through Project Paperclip all of their scientists and workers and intelligent officers and pretty much
Yeah.
created the cabal today, the military-industrial complex. Yeah, unfortunately, Truman was like you said, he was in a position where he had no other choice but to agree that the U.S. government was now under the control of the neocons and their draconian overlords, or reptilian overlords, which it's all going to come out eventually. It's all going to come out. But technically, it was Aleister Crowley, the demon himself. Man, that guy was I don't know what he was, a black magician, a sorcerer, a devil worshiper. But he was the guy who made the original agreement with a Gray, who was actually sent to him by a draconian. The agreement later manifested when the Thule Society, not the Thule Society, yeah, the Thule Society decided to, there was another secret society that struck a deal with Aldebrians.
Both run by women. It was the Thule Society that the SS worked with very closely.
Exactly. Very
but there
close.
was another society which were
The Verl.
channeling what they thought were, I don't know, Venus, but it was actually Sumerian. Yes.
Yeah. So I've come to understand in the galactic history that the Aldebrians were actually backstabbing Lyrans. That's why they were blonde hair, blue eyes, because they originated in Lyra, that decided to join the reptilians in their conquest of the entire universe at one point millions of years ago. And they took over the Aldebaran star system. But yeah, that's what I call the backstabbing Lyrans, that they joined the Iranian Empire.
that's I would say that's 100% accurate. The Aldebarans or Aldebarans, depending how you want to pronounce it, were originally a faction from the Pleiades that then worked with the Lyrans. Yeah. That is why their spacecraft is so primitive, because they have been under an embargo. They cannot get hands on more technology. And if your audience knows a guy called Adamansky, they've read some of his books. The similarity between the Nazi spacecraft, the Adamansky spacecraft, and the Aldebaran spacecraft is there's no coincidence here. They are all very similar, but very primitive in the way they work. And so, yeah, the Third Reich owes its evolution, shall we say, to that aspect of interference from non-humans. You mentioned Admiral Byrd. We don't need to talk about that because I'm sure your audience know everything about that. But the other one, the reason the overflight over Washington, D.C., your audience may not know this, was because the president was going to drop a nuclear bomb on Antarctica.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, as a word of warning to him, that's why they flew the flight. Now, lots of people say, if the Nazis had this technology, why did they not win the Second World War? And people who are well-meaning but don't really know the truth, they say, oh, they didn't have enough of them. That's not actually true. Truth is that at the time the Nazis couldn't weaponize their flying discs. They couldn't weaponize them. They were working on microwaves. They were working on other things, so they hadn't yet got it. So they had these platforms that could fly, but they couldn't weaponize it. So what they wanted to do was buy time. And, they did a deal with the American government, and, the rest is history.
Well, let's just call it. They did a deal with the Rockefellers and gang.
Well, they were the government.
They were the government. Well, the shadow government. You're right. The shadow government makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk for hours, my friend. You are just a resource of knowledge.
Uh-huh.
You're my kind of person. You're my kind of people.
Bless you. Bless you. Well, you and I, this isn't the first time we've met.
I feel that. I feel that.
Mm. Well, see how it goes with your audience. If they love it, we'll do it again. If they're bored to death, we won't do it again. But yeah, do a little vote, see what they want, and if they're happy, then next time you've got some free time, let's do it again.
Sounds good, my friend. And I'll go ahead and send you the copy as well.
Bless you. God bless you, and I mean it. God bless America. Very important.
Likewise, brother.
And we'll as we go towards November, I'm sure we're going to meet again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. May God bless you too, and may God bless the white hats.
Yeah, they need it.
Need it.
Okay, so you can do the cutting. You can do all the cutting on that. Lovely to meet you.
Likewise. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
Yeah. Great.
Let's see.
So an hour, was it? An hour? Hour 15.